Welcome to Neighborhood House. My name is Allison Wendell. I'm the interim director here. And it's amazing to me that 87 years ago, this agency was started basically in the basement of an old church in a rented room. And lots and lots of hard work and years of hard work. Here we are today and restructuring and doing wonderfully well, and just very happy to have you here. Today marks the beginning of a series of events for Congressman Carney's office, focusing on climate and environmental changes. And you will hear lots of that discussion for the rest of this half hour, and then we'll take the tour. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Carney.
Great, thanks very much, Allison. You got to watch for those interim assignments that you get. No telling where that's going to take. But thank you. I know you have some board members here and others here at Neighborhood House. First, let me thank you for welcoming us into your place here in South Wilmington. This has been a bulwark for good community work for generations, and thank you for inviting us. This is kind of the second stop on what we hope will be a week-long climate change tour is what I'm calling it. The way the schedule works on the House side of the Capitol in Washington, we work, have votes 3 weeks, usually 3 weeks at a time, and then we'll have what's called a district work week. So during those weeks, members are back in their districts, attending to business, doing things like we're doing this week. They tend to match up the work weeks with holidays, in this case Memorial Day, and we all commemorated Memorial Day on yesterday, even though the official recognition will be this coming weekend. So we remember those who paid the ultimate price for our freedom yesterday through this whole week and really every day of the year. This, as I said, is the second stop on our climate change tour. If you thought about the state of Delaware, I don't know that Wilmington, or certainly South Wilmington, would come immediately to mind as a place that that would be of great concern with respect to sea rise and the problems and challenges that presents. If you live in this neighborhood, my guess is that you know it is the case. I know it because for years as a state official, whenever we've had big storms, nor'easters, hurricanes, after the event, we go out to various hot spots in South Wilmington. This area is always at the top of that list. So we're here today really to hear a presentation from Jeff and other members of the city administration, folks that are working on wetlands projects and consultants to that work, to better understand what the problems are here, maybe what some of the solutions are. I know this wetlands project is seen as something like that. It actually is consistent. Those of you who are familiar with the riverfront plan that was developed probably 20 years ago now by then former president of the University of Delaware, E.A. Trabant, and former governor Russ Peterson. A part of what they envisioned just to the west of here, I guess, is a big harbor, if you will. I know it's evolved into something different than that, but I'm interested in seeing the current vision. Also want to thank Councilwoman Hanifa Shabazz for the work she does in this community. This is her district, and I'd like to hand the microphone over to her for a few opening comments as well. So thank you all for coming. We're doing a tour after this presentation. You're welcome to join us on that tour, and please feel free to grab me and pull me aside if you have individual private concerns or issues that might involve your own property or any questions or concerns that you have as we go through the tour. Feel free to follow up with my office afterwards. Albert Shields was here. There's Albert right there. He's our acting Delaware director now, also works on the communications side of our office. When you're in the House, you know, I tell people we only get one congressman, so I have to work twice as hard as the senators with half the staff, and it's so our staff has to be doubly good, right? So Councilwoman Shabazz.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go to the podium. It's just a little bit easier. First, I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to Congressman Carney for being with us today to learn more about some of the environmental issues that affect my home community of Southbridge. And I say my home because I'm a four-generation Southbridge resident. I grew up here in my adult life, raised my children, and my children are raising their grandchildren here. So Southbridge is very, very special to me. As the Special Area Management Plan, or SAMP as many of us know it as, made so clear to many of us that this area of Wilmington presents one of the most significant opportunities for economic development, community revitalization, and ecological restoration along the entire Delaware coastal zone. Your presence here today, Congressman, brings attention to some real concerns such as flooding and the rise in the sea level. But more importantly, your presence today brings attention to the work that is underway by the community and the federal, state, and city governments to mitigate this environmental problem and set the stage for new development, new recreational areas, and greater prosperity for this community. We are fighters here in Southbridge. We stand strong as a neighborhood of families and friends, and we stand strong with those who put forth the time and effort to assist us in dealing with the forces of nature that have created some very difficult situations for us over the years. In this community where I live, my children are now raising my grandchildren. These are generations of families here that we are committed to this neighborhood and to its improvement. We are also very realistic people in South Wilmington. Our residents and business owners know that nothing comes easy, but we are encouraged by what has been a steady stream of interest in recent years in the future of South Wilmington. Together, we have learned the science of how the weather affects us and why. We have been part of the development of a plan to strengthen the wetlands to help absorb water that floods our homes and streets. We have participated in the discussions about ways to divert water from homes and businesses. Under the SAMP process, we began to see progress on improving those long-standing environmental issues, creating new economic opportunities, ensuring greater waterfront access, and creating new partnerships. We got much more work to do. Unfortunately, while we will never eliminate the flooding issues, we can better control the waters, live more normal lives, and be better prepared for what God and nature brings our way. When you live in a city that is prohibited by law for expanding its land mass and tax base, you become very creative in developing the land you have within your boundaries. Our riverfront district, a former industrial wasteland, is an example of what happens when you commit to a vision and then add creativity and appropriate funding. It is also a textbook example of how government investment can leverage private interests and the investment that come with it. Our commitment to the people and the land in South Wilmington is unwavering. And while we and the land remain burdened today by the results of weather conditions and patterns, the visit and interest shown Congressman Carney's the visit and interest shown by your presence here today, Congressman Carney, strengthens our resolve to complete the process and prepare South Wilmington for the generations that will follow. Thank you for our federal and state and city partners, and thank you to the great people of this community for being here today and for staying together so we can complete our much larger mission. Thank you. I believe now we'll hear from Jeff, Director of Economic Development, on behalf of Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. I'm trying to multitask here. I've got my notes in my left hand and this microphone in the right. So the mayor could not be here today, and he asked me to pass along a few remarks. South Wilmington is a uniquely vulnerable part of the city. If you think about Wilmington, it's about 10 square miles of land mass. And if you think about all the shoreline that we have, when you include both rivers, we have a very high percentage of coastline. And a lot of that is right here in Southbridge. So preparing for what's coming through climate preparedness and for the climate change is an important policy objective for Mayor Williams. And although he could not be here today, he He's been here in the past to speak to the Southbridge Community Association, and he wanted me to let everybody know how important this issue is. A couple of examples of things the city is doing with regard to climate change, and then we'll get to one particular project here, the Wetlands project, in a moment. We recently completed or are about to complete the renewable energy biosolids facility. This is a facility that will take methane gas from the landfill and drive 2 megawatt generators, and it'll power the entire wastewater treatment plant, which will be, so that entire plant will be off the grid. Second thing, the city has a very, I think, aggressive policy on green infrastructure. We have a tree program. Many of you are aware of. Our Public Works Department does a good job at identifying sewer and rain sheds and then placing natural infrastructure, trees and bioswales in order to help mitigate flooding. And then lastly, the solar installation that we have in two locations. Those are all examples of how the city's preparing for climate change. But I think the single largest project that I've been involved with that I think is going to make a difference in Southbridge is the SAMP plan, the Special Area Management Plan that Councilwoman Shabazz mentioned. Simeon Hahn is here from NOAA, and it was NOAA's grant through the DENREC to the city that produced the Special Area Management Plan. And that was in about 2006, and it was a multi-stakeholder, consultant-led effort to produce a series of plans for the Southbridge area, many of which address localized flooding here and climate change. And that is the document that prepared the way for the current effort, which is the South Wilmington Wetlands Project. That project is taking a 14-acre jurisdictional wetland that has been filled over the past 100 years and converts it back to a functioning wetland that will then be connected to the Christina River and will help address the localized flooding here in the neighborhood, because in addition to the wetland, there will be a series of new pipes put underneath the streets that will then capture the rain flow and divert it out of what we call a CSO and into the wetland. So it's an excellent water quality and water quantity project. And in a moment, Brian Lennon's going to talk a little bit about the tide gates and get a better understanding of just what the problem here is in Southbridge. And I believe we're going to take a tour afterwards and maybe see a part of the wetland. Other points I wanted to make, what we're doing in Southbridge, and maybe Brian will touch on these, inspecting and cleaning out pipes, cleaning out drainage ditches. The south drainage ditch that drains most of the east part of the neighborhood was cleaned out and relined. Just finished up last year. The Newcastle County Conservation District did that. And then there's a number of efforts the city's undertaking to deal with the old infrastructure underneath Southbridge, which is a very low angle infrastructure system, right? Because this is such a low elevation here in the neighborhood, when the system was installed, there's not a lot of pitch to it or elevation change. So we're already dealing with a challenging issue to begin with. And we're really looking forward to continuing to work with the community. The one thing about the Southbridge community is that you know they're going to be active. It's a community that gets involved, and the SAMP process wouldn't have been completed without the dedication of the community. And it was about a 2-year project. So, well, I'll turn it over to Brian Lennon, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the issues we face here in Southbridge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm tasked with speaking out when we go on our visit to the tide gate at A and Walnut Street. And if you've ever been to a location of where a tide gate is, it's not very exciting. You're not going to see a whole lot of activity going on at the tide gate, so I thought it would be good to show why a tide gate is important, and also why the activity of the tide gates and the functioning of the tide gates is very important in relation to why we need this wetland facility to help us manage our stormwater. And as I'm not as experienced a speaker as our previous speakers, I'm going to try to speak more in pictures than words here.
Jeff mentioned the CSO. At some point, you intend to deal on how the current drainage works, and I assume that it's
Yes.
collected and it goes out through that CSO.
Yes, very much so. That's what we're, all right. Okay, first I'm going to start out with a few pictures to bring home the importance of why we're here and what we're discussing today. And this is actually the location that we're going to go visit at A and Walnut Street, 301 A Street. And these pictures were provided courtesy of Hunter Lott, who owns the buildings right there. And as you can see, the walkway going up to the dialysis building there is completely inundated. The tide gate is right near where this tower, metal tower is. So during Hurricane Sandy, that area was completely inundated with the Christina River floodwaters. And this is a picture looking out from the door of the photography studio that's right there. And you can see that the water actually came into the building. Again, here's a photo of Garish's Lane and Newcastle Avenue, and you can see how deep the water's got up all the way up to the above the tire level of the cars right there. This location shows you what happens when a tide gate is not functioning. Very near here, one of our tide gates had come off its hinges and was not protecting the system. And as a result, during the August 2013 storm, it allowed those river waters to come back in through the pipes and flood this intersection back, nearly 2 blocks worth of flooding at that location. This is another location that we're going to be visiting today. I had trouble choosing some of the photos as I was putting in here because there was too many photos to pick from, so I tried to pick the locations that we're actually going to be visiting. And very often during storm events, especially when we have storm surcharge and flooding conditions in the river, we have to shut down at A Street at Buttonwood, and you can see the barrels in the background there that the public works crews had to put out to keep cars from driving through the water. And the other photo is actually looking down Buttonwood Street towards White's Garage, where we'll be visiting later on today. So you can see we have tangible impacts. The other thing I would like to note about this is each of these 3 pictures were from 3 different storm events. So one of the aspects of climate change is that the number of storms and the intensity of storms will get much more frequent. So what used to be a 2-year storm may become a 1-year storm as a result of climate change. And those high intensity storms very much impact South Wilmington and Southbridge.
Is there any sense that the severity is getting worse with each storm, or is there no way of measuring that?
I haven't looked at the statistics of that. I may defer to my colleague Susan Love to talk a little bit about that if you have some more detailed questions on that. This is not quite related to the area, but it was in a similar time frame as the other storms that we're having. This is the Maisley Glove manufacturing facility. And I took this picture standing on the 16th Street Bridge, looking at it, and you can see that the levels in the Brandywine River were getting right up to the first level of the building over there. So while South Wilmington has its own flooding issues, they're not unique to just that area of the city. And this is where I took that picture from. You can see that the Brandywine River got all the way up to the structures of the bridge there. So it was a very significant storm event. And last but not least, one of the things I would like to note about this is these pictures were taken by Jeff Starkey, who's my boss's boss here, the director or commissioner of public works. And he's very interested in the issues of flooding in South Wilmington and throughout Wilmington. And so when he was driving into work when that April 20th storm, again, this is like the 4th storm that we're looking at here. He took pictures on Newcastle Avenue as he was driving in. You can see right over here, this is actually a manhole that's overflowing. So instead of the pipes carrying the flow away into the river, the pipes are beyond their capacity and the water's actually coming up out of the manhole instead of flowing in the pipes past that intersection. And very often, if you drive in and through Southbridge or up Newcastle Avenue, you'll find that you have to actually drive down the center lane of the road because that's the only high point where your car won't get inundated with the floodwaters.
And are those just water overflow, or are they sewer manholes that are backing up? 'Cause
This manhole right here is actually a stormwater manhole. So each flooding event in each location has its unique set of circumstances. And so in this case, it's that the stormwater pipes are most likely plugged. And we'll talk about a little bit later on what we're doing to address that. We're actually cleaning those pipes out with a contractor that will do that work.
But in some areas, our pipes are combined, right?
Yes.
Sewer and overflow. So sometimes that water coming off is sewer water as well.
Yes, and that will actually lead me into our next point of discussion. So as part of the SAMP program study, we did a South Wilmington drainage study as part of that, and all the red dots that you see here are locations of frequently occurring flooding incidents as a result of interviewing the residents and staff members from Public Works and elsewhere in the city. And as Councilwoman Shabazz had hinted at, we actually have 3 CSO diversions in the city. Back when the city sewer system was constructed, back in the 1890s, the city chose to put in a system which was typical for the construction. At the time, many large eastern cities have the same system. Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C. all have similar systems, and they chose to handle the sanitary sewer flow that's coming from your plumbing fixtures in your house and the storm water, and they chose to handle and manage those flows all in the same network of pipes, and that's called a combined sewer overflow system. And back when it was constructed, those pipes just went right down to the river and discharged into the river. And then in 1950, thereabouts, the city worked with the EPA grant money to construct the wastewater treatment plant, and they put in a network of pipes to take the flow from the city to the wastewater treatment plant at the end of 12th Street. But the pipes couldn't be constructed large enough to handle all the stormwater flow and all of the sanitary sewer flow. So the pipes were constructed large enough to handle the dry days worth of flow, but on a wet day, those CSO diversions overflow, and I'll show you what happens when that happens. So here's an example of what a CSO system looks like. The flow from the sanitary fixtures comes down from the buildings and goes into the network of pipes. There's also storm drains that are also connected to those pipes, but on a dry day, there's no flow coming in from those. And all that flow from those sanitary plumbing fixtures works its way down to the river, towards the river, but instead of going into the river like it used to when it was originally constructed, all that flow actually goes to the wastewater treatment plant. And you'll see on here there's a little dam at the end of the pipe, and that dam is designed to back up the flow and force it to go to the wastewater treatment plant instead of out to the river. So on a dry day, we work very hard to make sure all the flow from everybody's pipes and fixtures actually goes to the wastewater treatment plant. One of the things that's unique to the South Wilmington area that we have to manage is that the tides from the Christina River and the Brandywine River come and go twice a day. So when the tide comes up, it comes in like so, goes back down, but the tide gate at the end of the pipe where the outfall is, that remains closed. And the reason that stays closed all the time is to keep the river water from coming into our pipes and taking up capacity and sending river water down to the wastewater treatment plant. Now during a storm, the behavior of the pipes is a little bit different. So the combined rainwater and sanitary sewer flow works its way down to the river. When it hits the diversion dam near the discharge to the river, the water is diverted down towards the treatment plant, and a portion of the combined rainwater and sanitary sewer flow goes down to the river. However, as a result of the rainfall events, especially the more intense rainfall events, the pipe capacity going to the wastewater treatment plant is exceeded, and that excess flow now flows out to the river. And the system is designed that way to protect the inland areas from flooding. If you just had a block pipe at the end on a normal rain event, you would just surcharge the system and it would back up into people's basements and fixtures. So how about we wait till the end, and then I'll, if I answer your questions, then as part of the presentation, hopefully that'll work, and then if not, I'll be happy to answer your questions. So what's unique to Southbridge and South Wilmington is that when this rain event happens and you happen to have a high tide cycle over there, the river level goes up, and as a result of that river level going up, that tide gate will naturally close and prevent the river water from coming into the system. Well, now that's stopped a way for the system to relieve itself and discharge out into the river, and so that excess flow that was going out to the river, now at a high tide storm surge condition, it backs up into our system and backs up into the streets in the neighborhoods of South Wilmington and Southbridge. And one thing I would make a note, I spent, if any of you guys have any engineers in the family, you know we can be quite obsessive about numbers and visual accuracy here, and I actually modified this slide from the previous one to make sure it's accurate to the conditions in Southbridge. And you'll notice that the elevation of the floodwaters here are almost identical to the elevation in the river. And there's multiple locations in South Wilmington, in Buttonwood, one of the locations we'll be visiting, in which the elevation of the street right at that location is approximately what the elevation of high tide is in the system. So that tide gate is very important on a dry day to protect that system from backing up, and it's also important on rainfall events like this, that when it closes, there's nowhere to go, and the first place it comes out of the system is at locations like A and Buttonwood Street. So let me go back here. So one of the things we have been working on for the past year and we will continue to work on is tide gate repair. Each of these little stars that you see on here are locations of tide gates. We've already repaired 3 of the tide gate locations, and we'll be visiting this location here today at A and Walnut Street. But one of the things that is necessary for managing stormwater and flood conditions in South Wilmington, it has to be a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach. And Jeff has discussed a little bit about what we're doing. This will be a graphical representation of some of the things that we're doing. And many of the things, as we would describe in engineering, is very much nuts and bolts. It's not glamorous. It's not stuff that's going to make the papers, but we have to stay at it, and we have to stay at it year after year in order to protect the community from the conditions that lead to flooding. One of those things Jeff had talked about is a drainage swale restoration. And this drainage swale flows right along the Norfolk Southern Railroad tracks and discharges out to the Christina River. And this is a section after it's been cleaned. You see it's nice and straight and it's deep, and it allows all that stormwater flow that's getting on the east side of South Wilmington to get into that drainage swale and out to the river and through the tide gate out there. And just to orient people, this is a map of South Wilmington. This is A Street right here. This is Walnut Street, Market Street, Christina Avenue, and South Heald Street here. So the drainage swales that we cleaned out go from all the way from Newcastle Avenue all the way to the Christina River over there. Additionally, one of the not quite so glamorous things that we do, but we have to do on a regular basis, is inspect and clean the pipes. As Jeff had alluded to earlier, these pipes are laid at a very flat slope. They tend to accumulate sediment and debris in those pipes, anything from plastic bottles to the sand that we put on the streets to deal with snow and ice conditions. And this is actually a picture taken from a video camera inside the pipe. So we actually clean out those pipes to get any of the debris out, and then we videotape them to see if there's any defects or problems or collapses to make sure those pipes are flowing at the full capacity that they can. And we are actually doing that as we speak. The contract's been underway since the spring, and they're continuing on. So all those pipes listed in green here are all being cleaned out and inspected by video camera inspection. We're also working with that same contractor to make sure all the stormwater inlets that are on the corners of the streets are free and clear. Leaves, bottles, debris, bags can plug those inlets up and cause flooding. That's just local, that has nothing to do with the capacity of our piping system. It could be just blocked, and so we're actually inspecting all the inlets in the system. And as you can see on the graphic here, everywhere that you see a little black dot there is where an inlet is located, and we're inspecting all of those with the same contractor. The tide gate repair, again, we've repaired 3 tide gates. One of those photos that we looked at actually was a result of a tide gate that had malfunctioned and fallen off its hinges, and when we got that repaired, that it hopefully has addressed most of the flooding conditions at Christiana Avenue and Claymont Street, and we'll be visiting a location very similar to that today. Computer modeling. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. I won't talk about it too much. Just suffice to say that we actually have started underway a computer model of the drainage pipes all in South Wilmington. And to paraphrase it as simply as I can, is we're looking at each and every pipe in South Wilmington, evaluating what the capacity of that pipe is and what the needs are for any given storm that lands on South Wilmington, and compare how much need we have and how much capacity we have. And then in a computer model, we can then choose which pipes to update and upgrade and see if that improves the flooding conditions. And that work is underway as we speak.
So it's currently being used now?
It's under development right now. Yes. Be careful if you ask too many questions on that, because I'll talk your ear off on the computer modeling. Okay, the wetlands construction. Getting back to, if you remember back to those slides, when you saw that water in the animation actually back up into the neighborhoods of Southbridge and South Wilmington, that's a combination of stormwater and sanitary sewer flow. As part of our wetlands initiative, the wetlands are being constructed as a way to manage stormwater flow. That stormwater that's backing up into the streets, we have several choices of how to handle it. We can actually put a pump in, like they do in New Orleans. They would have to be very large pumps, and we could pump it out to the river. We could build a large concrete tank, but it wouldn't be very aesthetic, and it would be very costly to store that flow in a tank, and you still might have to pump it out of that tank in a neighborhood as low as South Wilmington is. So we've chosen to work towards the construction of the South Wilmington wetlands, where we'll actually divert the stormwater into the wetlands, a lower lying area than Southbridge and South Wilmington. And so instead of that flow backing up into the neighborhoods of South Wilmington, it will actually be directly to the wetlands, where it can be treated ecologically and discharged out to the river. So it's a very key point that the fact that the tide levels or tide gates lock that flow in, the wetlands will give us a place to temporarily store that flow, wait for the river levels to get down, and then the wetlands will naturally discharge it out into the river after it's been cleaned. And many of you may be thinking about the question, well, if you're going to divert that flow into the wetlands, isn't there a sewer flow that's combined in there? Well, this project with the wetlands project, and we've actually included it in our overall project budget and our capital budget, that money has actually been approved by City Council, is to do sewer separation in the neighborhoods of Southbridge, and we're actually only going to divert stormwater into the wetlands. We're not going to divert sewage flow into the wetlands. So as part of this project will be a sewer separation project in which we put new pipes in the street that will capture the stormwater from those inlets that we saw in the previous slides and divert it to the wetlands. And the area that's most likely going to have the majority of the sewer separation is areas from South Heel towards the west over here. This is a rough approximation, and our computer model will actually validate the extent that we can take that. But these are all the areas where we'll separate the stormwater from the sanitary sewer flow and divert it to the wetlands. And in actually taking that stormwater out of these pipes, it should provide some relief to the other areas of Southbridge and South Wilmington, and allow more room in the pipe for the combined sewer flow from those areas to flow in the pipes and out to the river. And then one last slide that I had added in here. This is just a slide that we worked with Susan Love and Coastal Management to develop. And this shows all the areas that would be inundated due to sea level rise under a 3-foot sea level rise scenario. And so there's still more challenges even beyond the wetlands that we have to face. All of these areas would be flooded due to overland flooding as a result of sea level rise and not necessarily our combined sewer system. So we have to have a multifaceted approach and deal with sea level rise issues in addition to managing stormwater in our wetlands. And that should be all. Hopefully that wasn't too technical.
Yeah, I know we probably want to move, but it's probably a good opportunity to take a couple questions on looking at ours.
I think somebody had a question here in the back.
Yeah, we'll start with,
Ma'am, I don't know if my chain of thought now.
Yeah,
Okay.
really, it should have been answered when he asked it.
Why don't we
When he answered it.
I had a question in the last slide, kind of going to raise it. So, if those are the assumptions under places that would be underwater, under certain assumptions for sea rise, are you planning this wetlands for what assumption, what set of assumptions?
The wetlands actually is a unique facility, and it's going to be a tidal freshwater functioning wetland. So the tide gates that we have in our wetland, let me put back one slide here. The wetland part will be located here, and there'll be a tide gate here, and hopefully a tide gate somewhere over in this area over here. And those tide gates will be designed to be a self-regulating tide gate that lets the tide come in and function and promote a healthy wetland, but they will also lock out certain levels of water so that the wetland won't have the same high tide as the river has, essentially, during most normal cases. And the reason that that's important is that will allow us to divert the stormwater that lands on South Wilmington, Southbridge, and store it temporarily while the effects of the sea level rise and that extra high tides that we're going to be experiencing are managed.
I see how it gets in. My question is, how does it get back out again?
Yes. And we've talked about this with Susan in our wetlands meetings, that this solution may, if the worst case of sea level rise is realized, be a 60 or an 80-year solution, and we may have to put something in place further if the worst scenarios of sea level rise are realized.
John, I just want to say that there's one entry or exit pathway now for the water to get out of the wetlands, and as part of this construction, there will be a second one so that the water can empty out quicker. So I think that might also.
You got a question?
Yeah, my question, in the interim, water is still flowing into the neighborhood. And, you know, I have a family that lives right here on Claymont Street. That the water comes in to the basements of the houses, and they're both disabled, and they have to put face masks on in order to go to the basement to do the laundry. So what is being discussed, or what has been discussed concerning that problem that's been discussed at other meetings concerning the basements and contamination of mold, et cetera, et cetera?
That's one of the driving forces behind why we're working so hard to establish this wetlands part, because those pipes that are beyond the capacity, we need a place to put that flow that's generated during a storm event. And because the pipes going to the wastewater treatment plant are beyond their capacity, and it would cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to replace those pipes and upsize the wastewater treatment plant. And because we can't pump that flow out to the river because it's combined with sewage flow, we're working to do this combined project with the wetlands that will hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years or 2 to 5 years, as soon as we can get it constructed, allow us to separate that flow out and provide some relief.
Can somebody answer my question concerning the houses of families
I
that,
think the answer is it's being worked on with respect to the longer-term plan, but for the immediate.
so it's not in this plan?
No, it is in this plan. It's the thing that's driving this plan. So one of the questions I had in the county, but it goes directly to a short-term solution. The county, they had a back valve program. They have a similar situation, and would that address the concern from the trees?
For locations that have basements, now
I
many.
think that's what.
Yeah, so a backflow prevention valve would very much help. However, they have to be installed carefully because a backflow prevention valve that doesn't take into account that your roof drains may also connect to that same sewer line can actually cause additional backups in your basement that are unexpected. So yes, a backflow prevention valve can be a good temporary solution until the long-term solution is put in place.
If I may though, I think what you're speaking about is that we're doing the technical engineering part to stop it from happening, but this family has already been has been damaged already, and they are not able to do the repair. And I was talking to you in about the FEMA, the flood insurance. I've tried to get a claim but it doesn't meet the high number of houses at a certain incident, as well as the value of damage. So we have homeowners who are homeowners insurance and flood insurance, but because the damage is not that massively severe, it doesn't help a situation like the gentleman is talking about. So there's no resources to be able to help houses and individual homes who are, especially at that particular corner, because it gets it every time. So there's no resources, whether it's city or through the flood insurance, that can help this family to make their house to be healthy again while we're doing the mitigation.
Well, we're happy to look at the individual program. If you have flood insurance, it should address FEMA federal flood insurance. It should address problems like that, I think. As I said, in the county, they used to have a backflow program where they actually funded the installation of these backflow valves to prevent exactly what's being raised. But we can deal with that individual case offline. The bottom line is the overall project, and I guess we're going to hear from the wetlands piece next, is being driven by the kinds of individual concerns that you're talking about. Just two more questions.
Okay, the backflow preventer will prevent it from coming up out of the pipe. A lot of the water in this area perks up out of the ground. All right, this area, the problems increased greatly when they diverted the water from South Market, South Walnut Street down here. And at that time, when they were going for that variance, I objected. I'm one of the city participants on a planning commission, and I said, when you do this, you're going to make Southbridge a rice paddy. And everybody laughed. Southbridge is going to be a rice paddy. But the water perks up out of the ground. You need to do something to stop that water from coming down. That settling pond is a good start, but it probably needs to be a lot bigger if you're going to take that water and this water. All right. Also, years ago when they started the CFO, combined sewer overflow thing in the city, I think Sills was mayor, they found a lot of these floodgates and a lot of these, and they were finding pipes that they didn't even know they still had. And it had never been maintained. A lot of the floodgates have never been maintained. If you go through and fix them now, what is the insurances that they're going to be maintained? That's the problem.
Well, that's the point. I think the point has been made that they're doing them and they have to be done on the long term. One last question, I hope.
Just a quick comment. The climate resiliency plan is definitely needed for this area. There are climate-related impacts that's been described, whether it's stormwater or sea level rise. There's others. And that climate resilience plan needs to educate the citizenry better about what their impacts are and what their short-term and long-term adaptations can be. There are federal resources to do that. So I don't know if the city of Wilmington has efforts going towards developing a climate resilience plan.
Well, I think that's what we're going to hear about next. But I think the underlying point is that you've got to keep everything maintained, as was pointed out, in order for the thing to work.
And it's not just one project. That was mentioned earlier. A lot of other things can go on in the interim, like the rain gardens and other things like that, to keep water out of the pipes. So doing something like disconnecting the pipes obviously takes more time and money than some of the other more subtle things, but they're all part of the plan.
And by the way, this situation is made even more difficult by the fact that the same requirements of the county system to disassociate, they don't have a combined sewer, but people plug their drains into the sanitary sewer which is conveying more and more water to the city system, which then causes the city system to overflow. So you've got a combined effect, not just what's draining here in the city, but the county flows that are coming through and that don't have the outlets that they previously had, right? Some big outfalls on the northern tier north of the city. So it's an overall project to eliminate a system that was designed to a different world, right, where you would just dump in sanitary sewer right directly into the water, into the river without treatment, combined with your stormwater system.